Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. Ukraine War News Update, second part thereof for the 22nd of September 2024. This is a military aid video. It won't be too long, this one. There's not too much to report to you. A few fairly important bits though. First of all, Ukraine will spend part of the 35 billion euro loan. This is the loan from the EU that they are being given, that is being underwritten by frozen Russian assets. So Ukraine won't have to pay back this loan. The loan will come from, I believe, profits from the frozen Russian assets. It's quite a clever way of doing things. So if you are covering the bank costs, the interest rates of a massive loan with the frozen Russian assets, then I guess the Russian assets will stay there and will continue to generate profits. They're kind of frozen still, so you're not confiscating those assets and you're not giving those assets to Ukraine. You're generating a loan off the back of that, and a loan is freaking significant. So $35 billion euros of loan, that's $40 billion, sorry, 35 billion euros alone, $40 billion of loan going to Ukraine to use for whatever they see fit. I think this is actually a really clever way round of doing it. Anyway, Ukraine are saying they're going to spend part of that, as you would expect, on long-range missiles and drones. Now, I don't know whether that means building their own or buying from others or both, but interesting. Of course, if you buy long-range missiles from other people, then you have the issue of firing them where you want, whereas if you build them yourself, you can do exactly that. Now, Ukraine has purchased more than 1 million drones this year. So it's bought 1 million drones, over 1 million drones, and its own production capacity is estimated at several million. So there were claims that next year they're going to produce, I think, 3 million. Well, technically, at this year, they appear to be on course for at least procuring 3 million. So building a couple and buying another 1 million. That is well up from the million they were planning on, planning on producing. Either way, I think Ukraine has surpassed expectations in terms of how many drones they can get their hands on, and that is fantastic. This is one of the asymmetries that they need to absolutely hammer home. They need to make sure that they are building more, they're buying more, they're getting better feedback from the front lines to do that R&D feedback loop. That means that the pieces of equipment they continue to get are the very best that they can get. They need to make sure that the training of their drone operators is as good as it can possibly be. They need to make sure that their tactics are as good as they can be and better than the Russians. At every stage of their use of drones, they need to be having an advantage over the Russians. And I gather at the moment that is the case. Now, no reports that the US is preparing to announce a large weapons package. So we've heard about this. Maybe 375 million is the next one for Ukraine, including, but I don't know if this is talk of another one, maybe, including artillery, air defenses, and other munitions. However, shipment may be delayed due to inventory shortages. The package expected to be larger than recent ones comes as the US has $5.9 billion left in its presidential drawdown authority, which expires at the end of the fiscal year. I wonder whether this will be a case of saying, right, we're going to give like a $2 billion package to Ukraine. However, we don't necessarily have all of that at the moment, so on and so forth. But it apportions, largely the 5.9 billion left, or as much as they can realistically. I don't know, but a really large package, even if they can't deliver that right now. That's on the books, it's done, and then you can get that as and when is needed throughout the course of the next, whenever. I don't know, but there was a time limit put on the PDA. So that PDA needed to be, I guess, announced by the end of September the 30th. But I don't know if there's a time limit on if you announce something, if you pledge something, when that has to be delivered. So there could be a bit of a loophole there. But of course, it means they need to apportion that by the end of September anyway. And that's an awful lot of money to apportion. Now, really big news. Lots of people are getting excited about this. So Ukraine's Defense Minister Rustem Umerov has revealed that there are ongoing negotiations for Gripen and Eurofighter jets. So the Eurofighter Typhoon is used by a number of countries, and you obviously have the Gripen used by few countries. There aren't too many of those. There are more Eurofighter jets, but actually there probably aren't enough Eurofighter jets to be. It's not like F-16s that are really quite widespread, and that means it's relatively easy to not only train enough pilots on them. It's not easy. It takes an awful lot of forethought and logistics, but you have the capacity to train a lot of pilots and to get a lot of airframes. So this is in addition to the F-16s and then Mirage 2000s, so not too many Mirage 2000s, and it's going to be fairly easy, I would have thought, for them to train pilots on that. I don't know about the logistics, footprints and maintenance and all that for the Mirage, but it seems official that Gripens and Eurofighters are at least on the table. We know that Sweden has just given an aid package that included forward planning for Gripens and maintenance and the acquisition of spare parts that might be difficult if you gave them Gripens or sold them Gripens or however got them Gripens and then had to start thinking about, okay, where do we get X, Y, and Z? They're doing that sort of stuff up front, which is really good. So we know that Gripens, or we can be fairly certain that Gripens are going to be part of the Ukrainian Air Force at some point. I don't know how soon that will be, but to throw in Eurofighters is an interesting one as well. Announceable results may come soon, says the Euromaidan Press. The minister hopes. Lots of people talking about this and how difficult or easy it might be. Tim White, for example, says Ukraine is hopeful of getting more fighter jets. Sweden has long tried to get Gripens to Kiev, and the Ukrainian defense minister has confirmed it's also negotiating to receive the Eurofighter. He says the problems are around maintenance, spares, and qualified engineers and training, etc. So all the usual stuff, right? But that's a massive bit of news there. The challenge is timing, right? They need those planes in the air right now. Like right now, they need Eurofighters and Gripens flying around shooting stuff. Is it going to be 2 years before that is realistically the case? They've expedited F-16s in a pretty impressive way, even though people might complain about how slowly it's been to get F-16s in the airs above Ukraine. To be fair, that's not bad, what they've done. So I don't know what the best case time frame would be for those. Right, Australia, says Nell Reports, is considering sending decommissioned M1A1 Abrams, so slightly older Abrams tanks, to Ukraine in collaboration with the US, according to the Sydney Morning Herald. Ukraine has expressed interest in acquiring the 59 tanks valued at $550 million, which were never used in combat. Australia's former Army Chief Peter Leahy supports the idea, questioning why they haven't been offered to Ukraine yet. Ukraine's ambassador to Australia confirmed they would gladly receive and use the tanks if provided directly or through the US. So they've got this multiple tank fleet that Ukraine would very much like. Lots of people have been talking about this in terms of Australia previously. And we can extend that to helicopters that they've had to bury. Helicopter one was a bit more contentious because, there were arguments both ways, because they were seen as maybe dangerous helicopters that had a bit of a dodgy track record, although some people saying actually no. And anyway, they ended up deciding that they weren't the best things to give Ukraine for, good or bad reasons, and that Ukraine didn't get those. Now, they could get these, that would be fantastic. David D, take what he says with a pinch of salt, says, just to be clear, the subject of the transfer of old Aussie M1s, this was tried last year and the US blocked it. Biden and Sullivan, he's got a thing about Biden and Sullivan, so blocked it at end user agreement. Now the Australians are going public, trying to force the issue and make the US look bad. Some of the US's closest allies have had enough of this crapola. Now, that's his interpretation. I don't know. I couldn't talk to that. He has an axe to grind with Democrats every time there is the opportunity. You could say the same about me in the other direction, but I don't know if that's a justifiable interpretation of what has happened with them. But it could be that the Ukrainians get older Abrams tanks sent over. That would be fantastic. The EU's new defence commissioner, this is a chap that we heard of, Andrius Kubilius. You've got Kaja Kallas, you've got this chap from Lithuania, Kaja Kallas is a former Estonian premier, and a few others in position in the EU that are really pro-Ukraine. And the new defence commissioner has said He's called for obligatory ammunition stockpiles, telling the Financial Times that capital cities, should be forced to have permanent inventories, similar to the rules on emergency gas storage levels. Quote, you bring added value to the security of member states, but in addition, you are creating permanent demand for production for the defence industry, he told Andy Bounds, adding the more EU ammo production capacity was needed, that more was needed. Quote, if I'm correct, we're still behind the Russians. Kubilius, former Lithuanian Prime Minister, said that the EU's new defence plans should include working with the Ukrainian arms companies, allowing for collaboration with the UK, and change investment rules to make arms spending sustainable. That's really good news to give a firm strategic footing for the EU going forward in terms of military expenditure and also just general military strategy. And trying to join the dots with the UK, who are obviously out the EU, and also Ukraine. So this is really, I'm liking what I'm hearing from the EU at the moment, and I think that is good for Ukraine. Okay, now Conor O'Brien here says, new in the Morning Defence publication, I spoke with Don Bacon. Who is Don Bacon? He's a representative who's just been out to Ukraine. He is serving the great people of the Nebraska 2nd District. Ooh, that's a big one. He's a retired U.S. Air Force. Nebraska 2nd District is Nebraska splits its Senate into districts, and there's going to be a lot of fighting over the Senate there. I don't think this is a senator though, so that's a representative, so he's a congressman. Anyway, Conor O'Brien says of him, I spoke with Don Bacon about his recent visit to Ukraine. He said Zelensky wants more F-16 pilot training and sanctions, but allowing strikes in Russia with US missiles is key. Quote, the rules of engagements really pissing him off, he said of Zelensky. That's fascinating and probably damned accurate. So here is what looks like, this is what they do in Politico, I think. So this is Conor O'Brien from Politico. Yeah, Politico, there you go. This is why they set it out, the takeaways and whatnot. Anyway, big news. Representative Don Bacon returned from Ukraine this week, and he's adamant that the US must ease restrictions on using US-donated weapons to strike the Russian territory. The HASC, so Security Committee, had a Republican who travelled to the war zone with fellow Armed Services Democrats, Salud Carbajal and Jimmy Panetta, called out the Biden administration for, quote, making the Ukrainians fight with one arm behind their back. He spoke with Conor about his visit and meetings with President Zelensky and other top officials. So takeaways. On top of expanded rules of engagement for the Western weapons, Bacon said his discussion with Ukrainian leaders and troops also centered on Ukraine's need for continued training for its F-16 pilots and more sanctions against Moscow. Quote, they were all on message everywhere we went, Bacon said. Even the lowest junior ranking people on the ground, they knew. ROEs, F-16 pilots, sanctions on Russia. Okay, for expanded use of weapons, the article continues. The delegation visit this weekend came just days after Secretary of State Antony Blinken and his British counterpart David Lammy visited Kyiv. The high-level visits came as Ukrainian leaders pushed to reconsider a ban on US long-range missiles to hit targets in Russian territory. Bipartisan pressure on Capitol Hill has also grown for President Biden to relax his policy. Many of Biden's critics, Bacon included, argue that rules amount to an unfair fight for Ukrainians by taking away major Russian military targets. Following meetings with Zelensky and other top leaders, Bacon said that the international discussion, but nothing has happened. The rules of engagements are really pissing him off, Bacon said of Zelensky, and I don't blame him. He was pretty clear that the restrictions do not help Ukraine and it prolongs the war. He said it costs Ukrainian lives and we've got to take the war to Russia. On F-16 pilot training, the article says another pressing priority remains to continue training of Ukrainian F-16 fighter pilots. The planes arrived this summer after months of wrangling. Ukrainian pilots trained to fly the jets at Morris Air National Guard Base in Arizona, but Bacon argued Ukraine's F-16 pilots need to continue that training to build up experience on the jets. He contends contractors should train them at a location out of the way of combat. Interesting. Quote, we need to find a way to continue training like some retired F-16 pilots have them on contract and fly maybe in a base in the very west of Ukraine, Bacon said, but we need to help them figure out how to raise the qualifications of the F-16 pilots who graduated. I heard that loud and clear. That's really interesting. So there are Ukrainian F-16 fighter pilots that need more training, that are having to fly operationally, and that's not ideal. So they need to be continually trained, preferably in Ukraine and to the west of Ukraine by maybe retired F-16 pilots operating in Ukraine under contract. Another supplemental. So on this, the article says other lawmakers have returned from Ukraine in recent months and urged their colleagues to allocate more assistance before the end of the year. A move some supporters see as more urgent with the potential return of Donald Trump to the White House. Bacon, a proponent of continued aid, said he's open to more funding to help Ukraine in a lame duck session, but argued, quote, the administration should tell us what the funding needs are. So far, the White House hasn't sought any more money, since lawmakers approved roughly $61 billion this spring to assist Ukraine and replenish US stockpiles. Quote, they do need to help us know what the need is, he said. That said, I want to help Ukraine win. The Biden administration has requested lawmakers roll over its authority to transfer nearly $6 billion worth of weapons and equipment to Ukraine as part of the government funding stopgap this month. If the authority isn't renewed, the Pentagon is warning it won't be able to supply Ukraine with weapons once a new fiscal year starts on October the 1st. More on that below. So they go on to talk about that. And that is obviously what we've been talking about an awful lot, including earlier in this video. And Don Bacon said, or just randomly, here's a tweet from him, just to give you an idea of who he is. Ukraine has gained sea supremacy in the Black Sea by using sea drones and anti-shipping missiles, and without using any ships. On the front lines, both sides are flying 1,000 drones a day. While helping Ukraine prevail, we must learn from this and adapt. So the idea is for him as well that Ukraine must be providing the US with, or the US must be extracting vital knowledge to improve its own military strategy and inventory, and to design and order exactly what it needs to operate in a modern battlefield. And Ukraine is the best way of being able to accomplish that. Anyway, that's enough from me for this video. Thank you very much. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.